How many people have to lose their lives in daily taxi violence? It has to stop. I mean, already this year, 10 lives lost and 4 just this weekend. Now, 15 million people commute daily and they are in danger of being caught in the middle of these taxi wars from here in Johannesburg all the way to Cape Town. So what is going wrong? Will tighter regulation of the industry help? And why is it not there in the first place? Joining me in the studio is National Taxi Alliance spokesperson Theo Malele and researcher from the University of Johannesburg, Siyabulela Fobosi, joining us via Skype. Good evening, gentlemen. A warm welcome to both of you. Let me start off with you, Mr. Malele. Why are we seeing this spike in taxi violence? What's going wrong?
Well, good evening to you and to the viewers out there. Certainly, the violence has become endemic. We really feel that the state has failed the industry because everyone has a right to life, and that is enshrined by the Constitution of the country. You know, we have the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature. I can tell you now, we've had 7 ministers of transport. Every one of them has been approached in an effort to bring this, spate of violence to actually finality. But
it's not really up to them, is it? I mean,
really, look, not taxi drivers per se. You must appreciate that the causes of this violence have to do with, the state. One of the main causes of taxi violence is the duplication of routes. There has been conflict. Yes, there has been conflicts around this subject for the longest time ever, and clearly there has not been any political will coming from the powers that be, which is why I've actually made that earlier on statement. Certainly, it is no one else that is causing this, but it is a self-inflicted problem, if you like, from the taxi industry side.
Siyabulela Fobosi, sorry, let me bring in Mr. Fobosi here. I mean, do you agree with that? Is it a problem of the state? Could this be dealt with differently?
Good evening, Jane, and good evening to the viewers. Thank you for having me. Yes, to some extent, really the issue has to do with the oversaturation of routes. And also there's an element of conflicts within the industry between the taxi owners themselves and the leadership, within the leadership, that is. For example, one taxi driver that I spoke to noted that the reason there is taxi violence is because there's conflicts between different taxi owners who are owning taxis. There's the taxi owner who owns probably one taxi owner owning about 10 minibus taxis, and the other owning only one. So there's a very stiff competition, within the industry. And there's, for example, one conflict that I can think of is a conflict that happened recently in Soweto, which led to the MEC closing the routes. The taxi ranks rather. The conflicts between the Witwatersrand African Taxi Owners Association and Mansfield Dube West Taxi Association. Where there's been clashes between the two, and the MEC had to close the taxi ranks. And obviously there are several negative implications of that, because that is affecting, the industry. So in addition to...
So let me just bring in Mr. Malele here. I mean, what I'm trying to get to the bottom of, I understand that there's pressure, I understand that, there's competition over these routes, but why this level of violence? I mean, how come drivers are resorting to that sort of level of violence? Where is the conversation? How come it's acceptable that it's okay to just take out your gun and open fire?
Here it is where it lies. Government officials issue one association to operate.
But please help me understand. What is it in the thinking of these drivers that it's okay to resort to this sort of violence? Why is there no dialogue happening?
Look, we are actually persuading people to engage on this matter as opposed to, getting into violent activities. But the fact here is that...
How do you talk to them?
No, we actually persuade them. With the recent issue that Mr. Fobosi is referring to of the Witwatersrand and the Nanduwe Taxi Association, both associations have been called into, under one roof. We are trying by all means to resolve this matter. But the crux of the problem here, is that these associations have been given the right to operate along the same route. Now, how on earth does a government official allow that to happen? That in itself is a recipe for disaster. And very well, the closure of the routes is but a partial reprieve, if you like. But the crux is that we need to get to the bottom of this to know why this had happened. And we've been trying to also say to the MEC, let's look at the actual causes. And he's saying, let the leadership of the taxi industry and the two warring parties sit down and find a solution to the problem. Now, the problem is around the registration of routes. What powers do we have on that? We have no power whatsoever. But however, as leadership, we are trying to persuade these people to try and find common ground. We have been engaging with these people for the past 3 weeks. Even yesterday till late in the evening, we've been engaging with them. Up until today, as I speak to you, they are busy in a meeting trying to find one another. So we are very hopeful that finally we will get to, some finality of this.
Okay, so it seems that obviously government and the powers that be need to be more creative here. But Mr. Fobosi, what I want to try and understand from you is how the structures work within these taxi organizations. Where does the power come from? Who bears the guns? What do you have in those taxis that leads to this sort of violence? How does it work?
A few people that I spoke to, they make reference to the fact that there's suspicions that there's an executive within the industry that controls how things are done. So therefore there tends to be disagreements, on how some taxi operators, operate, within Gauteng, for example, So, but of course,
the person that says, okay, we're fighting over this route, let's go and shoot up that taxi. What's the power structure there? Sometimes, most of the cases when that happens, it's when, the taxi operators, would say, look, we control this route. We have control of this route as per the regulations from the provincial regulatory entity, because the PRE, which is provincial regulatory entity, is responsible for providing routes to the taxi associations. So then the taxi operators would say, look, we operating with this route. You are coming on our operation route. So then that's where the challenge, the problem starts. Which is what Mr. Malele is saying. I'm trying to get behind or try to understand the psychology here and how so many people are caught up in this violence. I understand what's provoking it. I understand that it's not being dealt with. But who are the people who pull the trigger? Who are the people that think it's okay to shoot women up in taxis? Who are they?
Mainly it's your taxi drivers, shooting each other, having disagreements on how things are done, between different taxi associations, But what I would suggest, for government to do is to conduct, a study, on what are the main causes of this taxi violence, and then once that has been established, then a decisive national action plan should be taken to actually address this problem.
Okay, and Mr. Malele, do you think there needs to be more regulation because it's very scant, isn't it? And I should imagine there's a fear factor there in the regulation.
Jane, in 2016 at the St. George's Hotel, the collective leadership of the taxi industry in Gauteng province came up with resolutions that speaks to, on how best to quell violence within the industry. And the MEC of Transport had failed to help us to implement, that plan. That plan, amongst other, would include that we, as a taxi industry, proposed that there be a panel of retired judges, people that are uncorruptible, to adjudicate over these cases. There are cases, conflict cases, that are as old as 20 years that have not been resolved. So clearly here we need to have a political will. We need to have political leaders that will actually have the interest of the public at heart, because clearly here it is not the case.
And you wonder, as we said earlier on, how many people have to die. Mr. Theo Malele and Siyabulela Fobosi, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
It's a graduation season, and women graduates dominated at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Social media was buzzing today with these wonderful images trending, from joyful mothers to beautiful traditional dancers on stage. And that's our show for tonight. Coming up, Checkpoint looks back at episodes that made an impact and brought change for the better.